What's up? We're live. All one word. Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Sorry, I'm tending to a domestic issue here. Welcome again to We Hold These Truths with Seraphim. And we're doing a Sunday show this week. We just did a show on Wednesday. Definitely piqued a lot of interest, a lot of conversation. We're going to wait here a few minutes and try to get some people to build up an audience. Please feel free to share this video. Let's see here. Let's start sharing some stuff. And I hope everybody's week is going great. We are on the final stretch to Christmas. To all of you who celebrate Christmas. And I'm sure everybody is busy. Everybody is shopping. Some people are stressed. Some people are sad because they still are being alienated from their children, and our hearts go out to you. Let me share this with a few more groups. All right. Technology. Tell you what, here we go. Let's get this. Got too much going on here. Get on, come on. All right. Looks like we're starting to build up an audience, and just want to say, how's everybody doing? We will be taking calls on this episode of We Hold These Truths. And I'm just going to kind of give everybody right now a little bit of a trigger warning, because one of the things that we desire to do here is to really educate the public. I want you to be able to take these videos and show them to your pastor, show them to your friends, show them to people that are advocates or people working within the system, because right now, part of our issue, and I think that one of the main battles we need to fight is education of the public. Now, all over this country, people are waking up. Media is waking up. Legislators are waking up. Activists are waking up. Over the past few years, as we spoke about the last show, there has been a tremendous, tremendous awakening in our country concerning how awful foster care really is for kids. And we're going to talk about some of those facts. But, you know, I want to share a little bit of my life with people, because ever since our case became fairly public, you know, the Free the Schwab Children messages blow up continually. Our emails blow up continually. The Seraphim Amelia Schwab Facebook page blows up continually, and we get people asking for help. We get articles. We get all of this information that's been consolidated and continues to tell this horrible narrative that foster children in this country are not safe with the state as their parent. And so we're going to go over some of these news articles, and we're going to talk about some legislation, and we're going to talk about some things that we can do to help families. What can we do to take on the beast? Because honestly, it's not something that's going to change overnight. It's not something that's going to change without a lot of people getting engaged and sacrificing some of their time, some of their heart, some of their money, some of their own energy in order to be vigilant citizens and put an end to this state-sponsored child trafficking. And I tell you what, as I was preparing for this show tonight, you know, my heart was breaking, because we're getting all these articles, and I was reviewing these articles, and I was looking at how they work with various statistics. And, there's a lot of facts out there about what happens to kids when they go into foster care, what's happening to kids while they're in foster care, and what's happening to these children as they leave foster care. And it's actually really stunning. And so a lot's going on this week. As we said in an earlier post, so we have federal litigation for people that may have never watched a live update from us or seen this show. My wife and I, 3 years ago, had our children kidnapped by family members who then worked with social workers, law enforcement, and other agencies to create a false narrative, commit fraud, and steal our children and keep them from us for almost 3 years. And, I was engaging with some people on a post earlier this evening, and they were like, do you think you really won? What did you win? And I understand where they're coming from. Even though parents get their children back, that is not necessarily a victory. It's not in a victory of the sense that we've won anything. We've recovered what's rightfully ours. I mean, the Constitution and the Supreme Court of this land determines that we as parents have a right to have the care and control of our children without government interference. And so when they come in unjustly and they take our kids, or they run us through this process that takes years so they can maximize federal incentives on these children and in essence traffic them, when you get your kids back, have you really won? And I was thinking the Williams family. Jamie, if you're watching, feel free to call in the number and share some of your experience. We are going to take some of your calls, and I think this evening part of our focus is going to be on what has been your experience in seeing, either as being a witness and a court advocate, or as an attorney if you're an attorney, or as a parent that's been through the system. What have you seen in terms of the dishonesty in the courtroom? Have you seen fraud? Have you seen them commit perjury? Is that something that's actually going on? I'd love to get some firsthand testimonies this evening on that issue. But something that was really weighing on my heart. And, I've been watching posts of other parents that still don't have their kids back or their families together. And so this evening, I just want to take a moment of silence where people can silently pray. And I'm going to end it with a prayer. But this is a very, very hard season for people that not only have their kids in the system, but from dads or moms or anyone that's being alienated from your child. This Christmas stretch right now isn't a great time for you. And I tell you what, we as parents that went through this for years, and not only did we not just have our kids, but there was a time, I think it was the Christmas before we got them back, where we were guaranteed a visit. We drove 500 miles to go back and spend that Christmas with our children, and then the visit was denied. Even though we traveled all that way, wasn't reimbursed back to us the expense that we had to incur to go see our kids. And then on top of that, we found out later that people were lying to our children and acting as if we didn't even want to see them. And looks like, so we understand the pain. We understand the absence, but we just want to take a moment to honor those parents. We want to pray for those parents. And so if everyone could just take a moment of silence for those parents that are suffering without their children right now. And then I just want to say a small prayer for them. Lord God, in heaven and earth, we just lift up these parents, fathers, mothers, grandparents, siblings that may be alienated and isolated from their family members today. We pray for your grace during this time. We pray for your comfort during this time, that you help these individuals motivate to continue to fight this system. after going through this season, as they see other families together, as they see people celebrating in a manner that they're not able to right now, that you would comfort them in that pain, and that we understand it, Lord. We mourn with them, we weep with them, and we just pray for your grace in this season that's celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ, to bring comfort and hope and a resolution into these families' lives, that they can be whole again. We just thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. I know not everybody's a Christian, and I'm not trying to offend anybody, but we are, and it is the Christmas season, and we just want to extend our hearts to all of you that are suffering from parental alienation today. And we do want to give a trigger warning, because some of this stuff that we're about to go over, people still have their children in foster care. And so these news items that I'm about to go over may be a little frustrating. So I want to talk about some of these things just in this week. The state takes children because they claim that they're trying to protect them from neglect or abuse. But from what we've seen, statistic after statistic, time and time again, these children are not being protected. The state is a miserable parent. And when I look at these statistics that I even pulled up tonight, and I think to myself, if a parent that had a large family had these kind of statistics for the success of their children, nobody would be able to say that these people were good parents. I mean, some of the statistics are going to blow your mind. Ted, did I see you say we have a call that came in already? We have a call. Go ahead. Who do we have on the line?
It's your friend Joseph Gibson.
Joseph Gibson. Okay, let's bring Joseph on the line right now. We're going to take a few calls, and we're going to go over some of these news items. Joseph, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine, sir. And I just want to let you know, keep up the good fight. And, you said, the damage has been done. You were without your children for 3 years. So just keep fighting and keep awakening people to the truth. And, these administrative courts are corporations, and they're stealing people's children all around the country here today and around the world, child trafficking, all that. And you're doing a great job exposing that and continuing to fight even after your children have been returned to you. So keep up the good work, and God bless you, sir. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I know you were on my show this past week, and I love you, and you got my support always.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And you continue your work too, because I know you're getting the stories out there. You're telling people about what's going on in this country. This brother, when we were in our hunger strike many years ago, I think I was on my 11th or 12th day, he put me on his show, and it was people like him coming alongside us that really helped us raise awareness to what's going on, And last week we kind of talked about things that I believed aren't working, things that people need to be aware of, things that people need to be cautious of. And I thought this week, we've put the message out there. People know where we stand on things. Nothing has changed in that. Nothing has convinced us otherwise. And I want to kind of talk about what things are working. What things can we do to help our neighbor, to help others that are being victimized by this system to fight and hopefully get their children home. And another thing I was thinking of this week, when I was preparing for this show, was that it's a really hard balance. And one of the cautions I have with this, we have this new legislation that's been passed. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but the Family First Prevention Services Act. And I'm going to go to an article on that here in a little while. But one of the things I noticed that troubled me, and it's that these agencies, and I don't know how we can overcome this obstacle. It's going to take a collective work on all different levels for us to hold these people accountable. But what I'm seeing with them transferring funds so that these people can no longer traffic children in the way that they're trafficking children by removing them from homes unlawfully, then keeping them in the system through the manipulation of the legal process, they're not going to get as much funds to do that anymore. But my fear with all this is as long as we have agencies that are focused on collecting federal incentives and not the safety, care, health, and growth of children, I could see that we're going to see some tragedies of social workers still not doing their jobs. And now they're keeping children in the home where they should be removed to maximize their federal incentives. And there's some other things going on with this legislation that we'll talk about. And I just, when we began our journey in this, we had no idea. We met Jennifer Wynn, and she would use really inflammatory language. She'd call these people child traffickers. She would say they were evil. And I thought, man, she's so inflammatory towards these individuals. But as we began to see the evidence, as we began to see the money that was flowing to so many industries, we realized there was something bigger going on here. And as we traveled around the country and seen that even though each state had their own statutes that governed these civil proceedings, like Joseph said, these proceedings people go through, they're civil proceedings. They don't have the same evidentiary rules as a criminal hearing would have. And so the burden of evidence is very low. And we've seen that truly these state agencies are trafficking children for federal incentives. And more so, they're not keeping children safe. And I'll give you some examples. I got a whole list right here. These are a few sad stories that I've seen this week. One, in Utah, we had a woman who is a nurse and a foster mother. She's been charged with murdering her 2-year-old foster child. According to the story, this nurse, this foster mother, got tired of the baby crying, and so she smothered it in his crib. And just the horror the parents of this child are going to have to endure now, it's something that's beyond description. And that's one of the things that we've seen as we've been advocating for families, that a lot of these children's hospitals, a lot of these medical professionals use their mandatory reporting status to work hand in hand with DCF to steal children. We've seen them take kids right off the nursing breasts of mothers. They don't warn anybody. They don't do an investigation. These mothers have a child, and while they're nursing, while they're recovering from the pregnancy, DCF comes in sometimes with a false allegation, sometimes with legitimate concerns, but they snatch this child away. And it's in a phase where the bonding between the mother and the child are most important, where some of the immune and health issues from the mother giving the child her breast milk are going to be stopped because they steal these kids, and the trauma that it inflicts to these mothers. We had a case a few years ago that many of you are familiar with in Alabama, where we had a young girl, 14 years old, who was raped. And instead of aborting the child, she decided it to be a redemptive situation, and she decided to have that child. While she was nursing that child in the hospital, DCF came and snatched that child away because their claim was the mother was unfit because she was raped. That is the madness in places like Alabama. So here we have a nurse who's tasked with taking care of this child, because she can't handle the crying, she ends up killing this baby. And that's just heartbreaking. Let's look at some other stories. In Fort Worth, Texas, and we're seeing a lot of this more and more and more. Fort Worth, Texas, Adrian Martinez was arrested. This was a guy that worked for DCF as a caseworker, and he was busted in a sting where he was soliciting a 13-year-old girl for sex. Completely crazy. According to a lawsuit in Kansas, this lawsuit, so we currently have a federal lawsuit in Kansas alleging some of these same things, that they're committing fraud. And we're going to go over, they filed a motion to dismiss this week, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, the arguments that they try to use to say why what they're doing is okay. But according to this new lawsuit in Kansas, so this is a class action lawsuit that is saying because DCF is shuffling kids everywhere, they're stealing kids so fast they don't have anywhere to put them. And this is happening all over the country. So according to this lawsuit in Kansas, they're saying that Kansas is emotionally, psychologically, developmentally, and neurologically damaging kids. 1/5 of Kansas DCF children have been forced to sleep in offices. So because they can't get enough foster parents, and it's really crazy because in a lot of states, these standards for these foster parents are extremely low. I just read a story earlier in this week that here we had a foster parent that was accused of murdering another foster child. And the boyfriend, who was also a certified foster parent in that home, had just beat a murder case, had been arrested for drug trafficking. Now, both of these were dismissed, but there was a lot of alleged criminal activity going on in this home, and yet they were still placing children in that home. And eventually a child was hurt. So right now we have this class action lawsuit going on in Kansas that is being filed for all these children that's been sleeping in offices. And, you know, with this new governor race, so we had Laura Kelly come out this week, and I want to talk about that a little bit. So we supported Greg Orman as an independent candidate in Kansas. We supported a lot of people because we knew that these people were committed to trying to change this system. Laura Kelly was one of the many legislators that were at the Kansas Capitol when we went on our hunger strike. My wife and I and other individuals went to almost every legislator's office and handed them a letter outlining what had occurred to our family and asking for help. Laura Kelly, there was only one legislator out of all of them that even came up and really talked to us about what was going on. They supported our hunger strike on the Kansas Capitol. The rest of them ignored us. And I remember seeing Laura Kelly many times standing off at a distance. She'd never come up and talk to us. She might give us a little wave, but she would just stand there and stare. And I know that Jennifer Wynn's been very tied into watching what she's been doing ever since Kansas formed this oversight committee. So what occurred over the past year that was fought very hard by DCF was Kansas recognizing through an audit that kids in foster care in the state of Kansas weren't safe. And one of the reasons were these kids being warehoused in places like offices. And then I have another, it's not only Kansas, in Tampa, it's pretty crazy. Hillsborough County, Florida, in Tampa, Florida, kids were sleeping in cars, okay? And they're boasting in these articles that, well, now since the media exposed it, they have kids sleeping in their offices. So they've improved their living condition. Kids are no longer sleeping in cars. They are sleeping in offices. So this isn't only a Kansas issue, but Laura Kelly was put on this oversight committee. And recently this week, she came out and saying that one of her top agendas as the new governor of Kansas was going to be reforming the foster care system according to the recommendations of this audit. But we haven't seen her do anything yet. So we're really going to be keeping a watchful eye on this next year, 2019, with Laura Kelly in Kansas, because we still have these stories. There's a lawsuit. These kids are being warehoused by KBC. And then even worse than that, an employee of KBC, one of the agencies that we are suing, one of these agencies that were involved in fraud on our case, that had caseworkers that committed perjury on the stand, allegedly raped a 13-year-old girl while she was sleeping in an office in Johnson County. This is the caliber of these private institutions that are out there supposed to be protecting these children. And we have caseworkers accused of raping children. And I just read these things, and people wondered when our kids were going through the system why we were fighting so viciously, why we were so terrified of what was happening to our children being in foster care. And it's because you get story after story after story every day. These are only some of the stories that have come through this week of where kids are being harmed in a system that's set up to protect them. And so, Laura Kelly, we're going to be watching. We're going to be watching. We're going to be reporting. We want to see what you actually do for these foster kids in Kansas. Because what we've seen so far, yeah, she called out some judges in the oversight committee. She brought attention to the 70 plus missing foster kids that Kansas just allegedly lost. I mean, I want you to think about that. If one of my children just disappeared, now mind you, theirs is 70 plus, and I just went along with my life, I didn't report it to authorities or federal authorities, they would remove all of my children. Yet these people have a consistent pattern of putting children in unsafe circumstances with unsafe people where bad things are happening to them. There are parents where I've gotten reports that were homeless. Now, technically by the law, you're not supposed to be able to get your kids taken away if you're homeless. But here we have in Florida this agency that has kids sleeping in cars. And yet, for whatever reason, there's not greater oversight of what's going on or people being criminally charged for abuse or neglect. We have children that are moved from cars to sleeping in offices. What if I was forcing my children to sleep in an office, my work office? People would not consider me a good parent. And I know that people go through hard times. I don't believe that children should be taken away because a family's in crisis or a family is struggling. And we need to really keep a strong eye on these agencies. I don't know if you're in Florida or you other activists in Kansas, but this story is not going to go away. And the one thing that these people hate, okay, you want to ask me, okay, Raymond, what works? Tell me what works to get these kids home. And I'll tell you one thing that I believe works. And it's not based on my own experience. It's just based on truth. There's a passage in the Bible where the Lord talks about people who do evil love darkness. They won't come to the light lest their deeds would be exposed. Now, we know for a fact that these agencies are trafficking children. I'm going to share some more statistics to show that to you. We know they're trafficking children. We know that they are manipulating the legal process. They are taking kids without substantiation of abuse or neglect. And then a large majority of these children end up or a large majority of sex trafficking victims and other trafficking victims, come to find out, they come out of foster care. Now, I see these agencies, I see Christian groups, I see nonprofits that are all out there saying that they're trying to combat sexual trafficking and combat human trafficking. But rarely do I see these agencies combating the trafficking, the source of some of that trafficking, which is the foster care system. Oh, what a mouthful. Ted, we got any callers?
One just came on, but I haven't screened them yet. Hold on a second.
So let's talk a little bit about some of those statistics. These are the things that we got to share with people. These are the things that we have to educate the public in. So recently I got an article, posted it on Free the Schwab Children, that in Missouri, a 6-year-old girl who was a foster child was struck and killed by a car. Now, here's something that's very, very weird about this story to me. So apparently she was running away from her foster home and was struck by a car and killed. So I began to do a little bit of research about how many runaways are foster children, how many kids that were in foster care end up on the streets, end up drug addicted, end up in prison. And some of the statistics I got were really staggering. Part of the problem is that different people are giving different statistics, and they all range between, like with the trafficking, 60 to 80%, but it's a high number. But nowhere have I found favorable numbers for the outcomes of the foster care system in a lot of these kids' life. And the one thing I have to ask myself is, what was so horrible that a 6-year-old child, okay, a 6-year-old child flees from foster care protection to the point it costs her her life? And here's what the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children says. 1 in 7 children missing are the result of sex trafficking. That's a lot of kids. 88% of those sex trafficking victims, this is from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. 88% were in the care of the foster care system. 88% of sex trafficking victims come out of foster care. If we want to combat sex trafficking, we have to cut it off at the root. So then I got to this article. It was in the Amarillo newspaper, Amarillo, Texas, and from a foster care agency. They gave these statistics to the news source. They were saying 40 to 50% of foster children will never complete high school. 66% of them will be homeless, go to jail, or die within 1 year of leaving foster care. So think about these numbers. Right now, we have over 500,000 children in the foster care system. If every one of those children stayed in the system and aged out, 330,000 of them would end up dead, in jail, or homeless. I have 6 kids. I mean, if that was the statistic for my parenting, they'd come in and take all my kids. And yet we continue to trust these agencies to have minimal oversight, to operate in complete secrecy. And we have to bring it to the light. And that's why I brought that up about those who do evil won't come to the light. That's the one thing I know that works, that we have to help people do, is get this information out. What's happening in their case? We know these courts use illegal gag orders to silence parents, but we have to have activists that are willing to come aside, do work like Terry LaPointe, spread articles, protest, show up in court, court watch, bring a whole bunch of people with us to court watch and bring support for these families, because these agencies don't want people getting these statistics. They don't want people protesting publicly their criminal child trafficking activities. So the more light we bring to this, the more people we show up to court with other people. And I get it. I know there are kids out there that actually need help, that actually need a good foster or adoptive family. But the sad thing is, a lot of those people are... the kids that really need help are getting neglected. So we do have a caller, and let's go ahead and bring her on. Looks like we had Marilyn, Ted. Marilyn, where are you from?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. I can hear you. How are you this evening?
Oh, I'm fine. I have trouble with a cell phone next to my computer, so I'm listening to you, and my computer is off.
Okay. What?
I like the direction that you're going with your live feeds here. What I wanted to tell you is that I work with a group of experienced family advocates. And there are 2 things that we can do for solutions. One, change the law. Now, that's not an easy thing to do, but it takes learning how to submit bills and how to get them passed.
Yes, ma'am.
But the second thing is teaching parents how to learn to defend themselves in open cases. And yes, I don't want to get into detail now, but I'm telling you that I have a pretty long list for your future shows.
Well, why don't you share one thing? What is one, let's say, for instance, what would you say to somebody? DCF shows up at their door. They're good parents. They're not abusive parents. How should they approach that situation? I've seen videos where people are cussing out the case manager, and I don't recommend that. I understand the emotional reaction, but how can they protect themselves at that point in time when they get that knock on the door by DCF?
Okay, that's real easy, but it will take some detailed conversation with that family to make sure that they get all the information. Number one, they do not have to open the door to an investigator or a police officer without a warrant. So the first thing you do is politely ask for a warrant. The second thing you do is ask for the allegations. This is federal law. If they don't tell you up front what the allegations are, you need to get those And then you say, okay, thank you very much. Now I need to contact a lawyer, and I'll get right back to you and schedule a meeting.
Okay.
Those three things.
No, I would agree with you there. The one thing that we were accused of in the very beginning of our case is that we were non-compliant. And this is an accusation. These people are great at gaslighting parents. They're great at, because a good parent is naturally going to be appalled if they're accused of abusing or neglecting their children. And if they have a naive view of these courts, their natural response is going to be, if I can just tell my side, I just need to tell them the real story and the facts, and they'll understand I'm a good mom, I'm a good dad, and they don't have to be there. But it doesn't usually work that way, does it? When those caseworkers are there, they're there to gather evidence to utilize against a parent. Would you agree with that?
I have an answer for that one too, but it's a little more complicated because this is what I do 7 days a week with the mentor who taught me. Now I'm getting an echo. Can you still hear me okay?
I can still hear you okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. The second option, besides asking the investigator for a warrant and denying entry without one, is to invite them in, but then they need some information on how to handle that interview. And this is what I spend about an hour with families who know that CPS is on the way. That's not very many who get in touch with us that
Sure.
early in the game. But there's a way to handle the interview that works very well. And that's what I don't want to take up, 15 minutes of your time describing that. But I can tell you that there's a way to handle the interview too.
So
there are just certain things that you don't want to do.
Okay. And so in your experience, have you working with families, have you seen that this process of interviewing with CPS or DHS or whoever they're called, is there manipulation that occurs? Is there dishonesty that occurs? Have you seen that the social workers report accurately when they talk to these families, or would you recommend that parents record these interactions if it's legal in their state?
Okay.
Maybe, even if it's
now
not.
Now that gets into, if they decide the parent has the information that they need to handle this interview without a lawyer, first option is to get a lawyer to be there with a scheduled meeting, either in the home or in their office.
Well, let's say,
and that's the...
and I know that a lot of times they target families. I think in Pittsburgh, I saw an article that they were actually using a computer algorithm to determine potential abuse based on these parameters that they put in the system. So they target specific groups. So let's assume this family can't afford an attorney. They call an attorney, they say, I need $5,000 down. They don't have any friends. How can they protect themselves in that interview process?
They can learn how to do it on your live feed. I've been trying to get you to know that for more than a couple of years. If you are the one who's doing these live feeds, I assume that you have lots of followers who are listening and who can pass the word. If you teach families how to defend themselves at this early stage in the game, that's a good deal. I mean, it takes, I'm an activist for law change also. That takes a lot of study, more study than young parents have the time for. But so that leaves us with only one solution here, and that is to teach families what CPS is really, how they do things, and how to defend and how to deal with it.
Sure. And I think more and more from like when I began this process, as I said in the last show, it didn't seem like there was a cohesive effort of parents and alienated parents that were really working to spearhead this. There were groups over here and groups over there, and parental rights groups here and fathers' rights groups there. But it seems over the past few years, they've kind of been coming on together. And, I would recommend, and I have to say this disclaimer, nothing I say here should be construed as legal advice. I'm not an attorney. I'm a dad that had to fight for his kids, and I've worked with a lot of other families, and I know how these people operate. But we always recommend that parents record. They have to record. They can't record on a cell phone. They have to use a type of recording device that the courts can't say have been alterable. I guess a cell phone recording is not considered verifiable enough. Jennifer Wynn used to tell people to go get this little micro recorder that had a tape from Walmart because those usually are submittable in court. But we would tell them to record all interactions. Before this all, we've also told other families that even if the people don't know they're recording, they can take either tactic. If DCF showed up at my house today, I would let them know, I will let you talk to my children if you think there's a concern. I want you to be able to do your job. However, I'm going to be present, which a lot of people don't realize that you have a right to be present. Now, you'd have to check your state statutes, but in most of them, you have a right to be present when they interview your kids. That's why sometimes these social workers will go to schools and try to get your kids unknowingly. We went to our children's school, and I put a notice in that basically said, if DCF shows up, if a lawyer shows up, if police show up, if any of them want to interview our children, that they need to contact us first so that we can get our attorney present, that we will allow that process to go forward. But the school needed to notify us before anyone spoke to our children by themselves, or else we would take legal action against them. And so far, they've been honoring that. But we always encourage parents to record, because one thing we've seen in case after case after case after case is these people lie. And not only will they lie, they will manipulate and twist anything that parents say to spin it in the most negative light possible. Now, mind you, I don't want to demonize every social worker. I don't want to demonize every DCF worker. There are good people that want to help kids in this system. Unfortunately, a lot of times they don't last. They either get burned out or they get chased out because they won't participate in the fraud. So I don't want people to come with this idea that if a social worker comes to their house, it's automatically hostile. I mean, we need to discipline ourselves and educate ourselves now. What are our rights as parents? Get involved with groups like the Family Forward Project. Go ahead, ma'am.
This is exactly what I called in, because I want you to do the educating instead of ranting, as I've seen on so many other live feeds, which I won't even participate in those. I listened to enough of those 5 years ago. If you're going to be as articulate as you are, then and you have the time and the wherewithal to even know how to do a live feed, then the parents need to be educated. Not, they need to be educated, period, end of story. What do they do to defend themselves? And I have a list. I'd like to give it to you off of this show sometime so that you can cover all these subjects, because parents don't know these things.
And I would like to invite you on something here. So with this show, we have started a group that's attached to the Free the Schwab Children page. And I think we already have like 100 and some people in that group. It's called We Hold These Truths. What we want that group to be is a place where parents can connect, another alternative, where after these shows, I'm going to go into that group. I'm going to post articles we've talked about. We're going to post resources so that parents, if they listen to this show, they can go back through and get that information. If you want to send me some of those things, Marilyn, just message me through the Facebook page. We'll take a look at those. And definitely, we want to share any good information with families that are going to help them. And we're not anti-government. We're not anti-system. We just realize what we have right now is not working. So what do you think,
Well, that's because they don't know their rights, and there's a reason for that, because they don't associate a child welfare investigation with a police investigation. So, but both are equally as serious in the end if they're founded for abuse or neglect of a child. It's no different than being arrested.
Even if they're not, I was going to share some of those statistics tonight that just like in the state of Kansas, they have like 7,300 children in foster care. And the last time I checked, 96% of their removals were with an unsubstantiated finding of abuse or neglect. I saw Indiana was like 86%. Texas was like 79%. So a large majority of these agencies and institutions, even if they don't substantiate claims of abuse or neglect, if they think you're a solid target, they're going to keep your kids. And another thing I found interesting is no matter where you look, it's saying that the average time a child stays in foster care is 2 years. And that's where you start following the money. As you look at these different federal regulations that umbrella the state statutes and how each state orchestrates and organizes their child protection agency, you can follow the money and see that, hey, after 2 years, the federal money starts drying up. But I wanted to give parents a warning. Marilyn, really thank you for your call. I'd love to have you come on and share some more sometime, and please send us that information to the Facebook page and join the group. We hold these truths. Well, appreciate your calling.
Where do you want me to send? Where do you want me to send the list of solutions? On to free Seraphim, or on to We Hold These Truths?
Seraphim, Amelia, you can send it in a message to free the Schwab children, or you can share it in the group We Hold These Truths. Any of those places, I'll get them. I check all of them daily.
Okay,
and,
I have a list of important topics. And if you can get that information out, that's part of stopping the abuse of power of child protection. And that's what we want to do, is we want to get more parents to know what their rights are and to exercise them. That's the solution to stopping them before they take too many children needlessly.
I agree. And I do believe that some of this is going to start changing. And I did want to talk about some of that. I don't know if we're going to get to the stuff about our own case, but what do you think about this new legislation? I think it's called the Family First and Preservation Act. Let me find that correct title.
Okay. First of all, the FFA has good intentions, but keep in mind that each state has to determine how they're going to implement the FFA. And so I'm not as wanting to be involved with that as simply to teach parents how to defend themselves in the first place before it gets to the point where we need federal legislation. I'm more into that and into changing state law. The key is state law, not federal. Federal is okay. FFA is a good thing. But the states are the ones who are abusing federal law. So I put my entire focus on state law and how to change it to hold them accountable. And I've already done that twice in my own state. I found violations of federal law for my state. And I contacted the feds, and they made them fix it. So,
and sometimes they will. Other times they'll ignore it. Each state is supposed to have an ombudsman or some kind of advocate that's overseeing. Because like with Kansas has the Kansas plan for Title IV funding. All their statutes and their regulations and their policies are under the umbrella of that federal law. A lot of it comes from Hillary Clinton's Adoption and Safe Family Act, that's where they start giving the federal incentives to remove children from homes and more federal incentives to adopt them out to strangers instead of keeping them with families. So the states begin to model off that federal legislation. But what I found with this Family First Act, and, at first I was kind of disappointed in how they modified it myself. I mean, we went out to Washington, D.C. We went out and lobbied for this legislation with a lot of people. We were out there banging on doors and talking to legislators and sharing stories and protesting with the bullhorn and trying to get this information out. We had people calling legislators that were trying to stop it from going through. So it finally gets implemented, and there is a few good measures. However, like you said, the one thing that we really need to start hammering on is that they are trying to give these states a 2-year waiver for implementing the provisions in this act. And I have a fear that we got to give them some time, because they have to change this system slowly in a manner that's going to be least disruptive to some of these kids that are doing okay. But the problem is, states like Arizona that are horrible child traffickers, that are engaged in just awful transgressions against families, to the point I've seen them go to another state to pursue a family and drag their kids back to the state of Arizona. But they want a 2-year waiver. And I can see them really increasing their child trafficking, stealing kids, trying to maximize all the incentives under the past legislation before they go to implementing this. Because part of these provisions, and I was going to talk about this, let me find those notes, because I think these are interesting. I have a link. Oh, I have so many articles here I didn't even read. I mean, we got foster kids being killed. We got foster kids sleeping in offices. We have foster CPS workers getting arrested for horrible crimes. We got to change this system. So here's one of the things I want to share. Go ahead, Marilyn.
I've been following a Facebook group for 6 years, and it's called Legally Kidnapped. And all of the news stories are being pulled from all over the country. You can see all of those stories on that one group called Legally Kidnapped. So I know all about that. That's for a lawmaker to see. And I put together stories just like that for my own state. But I'm back to being more interested in teaching parents how to defend themselves before their case gets far enough to have their children removed or to stay in foster care forever. That's my deal, and I'd like to see you teach that at every live broadcast that you do.
Well, I'll do my best. I mean, that's the point of this show, is to get this information out that can help children and families, that can connect activists from around the country to help each other, that can get the news out of what's going on, because some people aren't just going to go and peruse these sites. We need to have resources. We can send these videos to people. We can send these links and articles. Marilyn, thank you for your call. Ted, do we have any other callers on the line, or should I go forward? I want to talk about this Family First before we only got a few more minutes left on the show. It went so fast, but I want to outline this. Say that again?
It does go fast, yeah. There are 3 other callers. I'm having an issue with my phone screener, actually. So I'm having to screen them
we'll go
one
a
at
little
a time.
longer, guys. Marilyn, we're going to have to let you go. We got some other people waiting. I do want to go over this really quick, because I've been reading, and if you guys go, and I think I sent you a link, Ted, if you can put that up, to the National Conference of State Legislators. That's where I got this information from. They have the Family First Preservation Act outlined, broken into category, and you can start reading it. And I really believe it is the beginning of a change that's funneling this money in the right direction. So this act is going to transfer funds not to keep kids in foster care. Right now, kids are being kept in foster care for up to 2 years because the federal money pays for that long. And then if you adopt the child out to strangers, you get another extra bonus because Hillary Clinton said she wanted to put kids in forever homes. But then criminals came in, began to use this legislation, began to use these things as models to traffic kids and fill up their state coffers. But this is going to transfer that process to where children that are in foster care are not going to get the same amount of funding as kids that are being kept in family preservation. That's going to be kept kids in with a relative, with a cousin, with an aunt, with a grandma. Right now, this is the process I've seen happen all over this country, is even grandma may get the child when the case begins, and then when they're nearing termination, they terminate the parental rights. Then grandma all of a sudden is disqualified because she got a DUI 30 years ago. And all of a sudden those kids are ripped out of her home and sent with strangers. And that's coming based out of the Hillary Clinton's Adoption and Safe Family Act of 1996. But this new act transfers that funds to family preservation and to keeping kids in the home. What it's also going to do is stop this child warehousing. They're only going to pay for kids to be group homed for 2 weeks because they found it's destructive to children to keep them in these massive orphanage group homes. These kids that are getting stuck in offices and cars, if they are not in a legitimate placement, there will be no federal money. The states are going to have to be paying for this out of their own pocket. And so that's going to move because money moves this whole thing. And so when they realize that they're actually going in the hole because they're not properly implementing their system, then people are going to start changing things. It also is going to go to mental and substance abuse treatment programs that must show results. So it can't be some canny state-run program where the recidivism and relapse rate's 90%, where they're just warehousing people to get federal money. Somehow they're going to set a group of guidelines where these mental health and addiction treatment programs have to show significant results, that it's actually helping these parents and that it's helping reunify these families. And I think that's a great push in the right direction. So let's go ahead and take another call. One last thing. I just want people to know we need to start, whoever your representative is in Washington in your area, you need to call them as a vigilant citizen and let them know that you don't want your state to get a waiver for the implementation of this act, that you want them to start putting all the funds into family preservation now. Start getting these private child warehousing agencies out of the picture and keeping children, when it's safe to do so, within their family structure where it's proven they're going to do better. Go to Medical Kidnap. You'll see Terry LaPointe has done an article that even kids that are in homes with an allegation of abuse seem to be safer and do better than if they're taken out and stuck in foster care and shuffled around and then adopted out like puppy dogs. Some of these state sites it disgusts me. I was on one the other day and they just paint these kids all nice as a pretty picture. If a parent puts a picture of a child up, they're going to get gag ordered. They're going to go to jail. But these states have adoption websites where you can go pick your child. And I know that there has to be a method to do this, but it blows my mind that they're just so blatant about it. And they attack parents that even share a picture of their child while they're going through these proceedings. So who do we have on the line, Ted?
This is Jamie Williams.
Jamie Williams, Victory Story.
Raymond,
Cowboy Mama, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
We're doing well. It's been a little hectic. This is our first Christmas where our kids are actually in our home since they stole them. We did get to spend last Christmas with them a little bit. I couldn't. I was in Puerto Rico. My wife was at her mom's, but it was very stressful. But now all the kids are here. And it's just really been a blessing.
Yeah, makes it more special.
So I was thinking about you, and I wanted you to share a little bit about, you had a social worker come to your house when they were going to work on giving you your kids back. And what was her assessment of what had happened to your children while they were in the foster care under the care of St. Francis Now they call themselves St. Francis Ministries. I don't know what they're ministering except the destruction of families. But St. Francis Community Services, how did your children fare in all of that?
Not well. I mean, being home, they're starting to thrive, obviously. You kind of personally know some of the fights we've had with just the mental health of the kids coming home. It's really hard on them, especially the younger ones. It seems to be more of a toll on them because they didn't even know who we were. You know, so that's hard on them. You know, my son now finally realizes what siblings are. He forever would call Memphis. I was Memphis's mom. He didn't understand him and Memphis were sisters, so that meant I was his mom too.
Oh, wow. Wow. Now, they're supposed to be facilitating all that family reunification and family healing. Are you saying that didn't happen at St. Francis's hands?
No. I mean, we now have aftercare workers, which I've got to really give credit where credit's due. Our aftercare workers have been amazing. The newest aftercare worker that we have, she actually was the one that drove our kids the day they were taken from the police station to foster care.
Oh, wow.
And she is part of St. Francis, and I don't know if you know this or not, but Butler County lost the contract with St. Francis. They're now going to be, I believe, KVC or the farm.
Oh, that's interesting.
So,
and they got KVC getting accused of their case managers raping little girls in their offices. It's so horrible.
Yes. And we know that, you know, there's good and bad and all. And I've had the blessing of good ones. And obviously a lot of our problems came from one bad one. Just as yours, a bad one can make a case really bad.
Yeah, they can. But if you'd agree, possibly that, in my opinion, part of that is the secrecy. Part of that is the silencing of parents and not being able to tell people what's happening in your cases. Because you were a mom, you were gag ordered, you were threatened with jail multiple times. The kind of question we threw out earlier, and maybe you could share a little of your experience or share whatever you want. Just, if anybody doesn't know this is Jamie Williams of the Williams family I was talking about earlier. She had all of her children taken. And just ran through the system to the point that they were on termination hearing when we met them, and about 30 people showed up for her court hearing. The court was terrified. They thought they were just going to run these parents through the mill and get away with it. And then slowly it turned around, but they still really put this family through a lot. All of their children definitely need some lengthy recovery. But this is a family who we can say followed the advice of advocates in their life and learned how to fight for their own case in a manner that worked for them. And they did get all their children home. So what, in terms of fraud and things of that nature, did you see in your case? Like, did you see people lying on the stand? Did you see in the affidavits people being dishonest?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, most of the things we were even accused of were either blatant lies or things that, like, they allowed my mother to tell them. You know Floyd on a personal level, and my mom had told them that he was an alcoholic. And I'm pretty sure you've spent a lot of time with Floyd. Have you ever seen him take a drink of anything?
Right. And when they do
and
that
was
just
put right
automatic truth all of a sudden, you know. But anything good about the parents, they dismiss.
Oh, yeah. My mother had not seen my kids in years, lived in many miles away, over a 12-hour drive away. So, you know, but they took everything she said golden, because me and her don't have a great relationship. And she really, I believe, was trying to get my oldest daughter because she really has a tight bond with her. But yet Floyd's mom, who lived 4 hours away and had spent a week with us 2 weeks before they were taken, anything she had to say was never put into court records because she had positive things to say.
Yeah.
So, you know, double standard kind of thing.
And not only
but,
that,
you know, that kind of stuff happened a lot.
Sure. And in the state of Kansas, a lot of these reports that are written, it says in the statute, are not to be given to the parents, and you're blindly defending yourselves. But is there anything you wanted to share with parents tonight, or a reason you called in, a question, anything on your heart tonight?
Just, the biggest thing is, talking about the new Safe Families Act. Obviously, we've seen that finally come around, which has been, 2.5 years now for us.
Yeah, you were on
and I know
with us as well.
Yeah, I was there with you.
Yeah, I forgot about that. It was a long trip.
It was a very long trip. That was the day after my arm surgery, so it was longer for me, I think, than most.
Yeah, this mama was out there protesting with a broken arm. I mean, nothing was going to hold her back. It was some amazing courage there. So, sorry about that. What were you going to share? I apologize.
I was just going to say that, right now, Kansas is wanting to put, $3 million, 3.9 or something silly into preservation.
Right. I saw that when I was going through tonight.
And with this new act, they're going to match dollar for dollar for preservation, which is, I think, it's the biggest key to solving a lot of our foster care issues. Because, as you said, following the funding, they only get money when the children go into foster care with the previous way things were worded. And now we have this wonderful opportunity that Trump signed in at the beginning of this past year, finally signed it in, that says, hey, we see we need to preserve families. These families are being harmed worse in foster care. So let's see, even if a family is a drug addicted. I mean, I know several people who are drug addicts that probably do need their kids taken away, but I know some people that do drugs that are not at all affecting their children at all. It's case by case. And when children are being molested, raped,
see children in that
beaten,
kind of environment, but at the same time,
yeah, when they're being treated as bad as they're being treated in foster care, it's the lesser of two evils. And not to mention, nobody loves your children as much as you do, no matter what. Even if you're going through a hard time, and even in our case, preservation probably would have been the best answer. I'm not going to say our life is perfect.
That's one of
I'll
the
never
things
say
that I saw is for these parents that are addicted. See, here's the problem. It's not that, well, you're an addicted parent, but you're not abusing your kids, therefore they shouldn't take them away. Obviously, you should want what's best for your children. Now, me being a libertarian in that kind of ideology that people, whatever they put in their body, that's their business, they're going to suffer the consequences of it. People have to get involved if that process rolls over to where their children are being abused and neglected. But right now, there's not a lot of avenues to help these parents. And this act is what it's supposed to do, is begin to fund for parents to get help. Because what they're doing now is they're finding families in crisis, finding reasons to steal these children. They're not giving parents appropriate services. They're giving them phony services that just becomes evidence gathering activities that they're going to use later against the parents in court. And it doesn't actually seem to be therapy or treatment or things that are actually helping these parents. This new act is supposed to have some kind of evaluation, results-based therapy, where these parents are
supposed to be some kind of proven to help, not just some willy-nilly, oh, we put some effort into it, I roll. They actually are, I'm really impressed to see so much preventative, that they've seen what's going on, and they're putting walls and barriers against these lanes that DCF is used to fast track kids straight to foster care and into adoption.
Yeah, well,
just destroying families along the way.
Some of that definitely to turn around soon, but we do have a few more calls. Jamie, is there anything you want to share with the listeners tonight before we let you go?
No, the only one little thing was with the previous caller. It's great to tell parents how to defend yourself, but not many parents go looking for help until they're already in a situation where they're in dire straits. And it's too late at that point. Yes, it's great if we could get out there and tell everybody, but I think the biggest thing is we got to remember most the people that are going to come looking for help already have kids in the system. And we need to start working on how to teach those parents how to fight, to not listen to any crazies, to keep your, sanity tucked in, and to think things through before you do it, and try to make the right decisions as you go along that path. It is a very long path. It's a very hard path, but you have to stay within the lines of sanity. And I know it sounds bad, but because it does make you crazy. You got to tuck it in, and you got to do what's right for your kids every step of the way, and make every decision with a lot of thought process.
Yeah, that's a lot of wisdom from a mama that went through it. Hey, thanks for your call tonight, Jamie. And you guys.
Hey, Merry Christmas, Ray.
Wonderful
Merry Christmas to Amelia and the kids.
All right. Take care.
Floyd says hi too.
All right, Floyd. Take care, everybody.
All right. Love you guys.
All right. So love you too. I agree. There isn't one, and this is part of the discussion I've been having with people over the last week. Granted, there are multiple things that people try. I would not advocate everybody take the tactic that we took to get our kids back. We did not do everything that they asked. We challenged the things they tried to demand of us. We went out and found ways to hire our own specialists and professionals. When they demanded a service, we would complete what they asked, because if you don't go through these parenting plans, if you don't do some of the things that the judge has demanded that you do, but you do it in a smart and safe way where you're not with people that are tied into the system that are helping facilitate the trafficking of these kids, it takes, like Jamie said, a lot of prayer, of forethought, of realizing that the choices you make to defend your family could have an impact for the rest of your life in the terms of never seeing your children again. So it has to be done with the multitude of counselors. It has to be done with people on your side and other people arm in arm fighting for these kids and fighting in these courts from every aspect. Like Jamie said, going to court with court support, or what Marilyn said with having people educating parents. I don't think it's too late. I mean, you educate people where they're at, but you definitely have to start somewhere with showing these parents how to get their kids home quickly. Because I tell you what, another part of this legislation of the Hillary Clinton legislation, a lot of people don't know this. There's part of it, it's called the 1522 rule. And you'll see these parents and they're like, well, I've done all the classes. I've done everything DCF has asked. Nobody's calling me. We're not going to court. We don't know what's going on. If you're not pushing the process, if you're not demanding reintegration, if you're not being active, if you're being a passive participant, federal regulation says that any child that is in foster care for 15 of the 22 months that they've been out of the parent's home, the states are required to terminate your parental rights. So they'll play these games. They'll let you run around and defend yourself and to take classes and do whatever. But if you're not pushing the process and demanding your children and having other people come alongside you and help you in this, once you hit that 1522 mark, they will terminate you no matter what. Well, I won't say no matter what, because Jamie hit that mark and they didn't terminate them, but I'm saying they can. They can. And a lot of times that's what they utilize against parents is, well, they've been in foster care too long now, so sorry, you're not getting them back. Then they traffic these kids out. And we've seen from some of these statistics what those results look like when they stay in that care. We'll go ahead and take one more call, Ted. For those of you that are waiting online, we apologize. I didn't realize I'm going to have to get better communication with Ted, that we had people on. We're still working the kinks out of this. I definitely want this to be a caller-centered show. I don't want it to just be me ranting and saying news that break all of our hearts, but really be interactive of how we can help families, getting families calling that want to get connected with resources. But we'll get better as we go along. Who do we got on the line right now, Ted?
We have
Ted.
That's all right. Anonymous from North Carolina. This is somebody I met at the Nancy Schaefer event in Georgia last year. Anonymous, yep.
Uh-oh. All right, Anonymous, what do you got for us?
Hi, how are you?
Doing well.
Can you hear
Merry
me?
Christmas. Yeah. Thank you for calling.
I was just going to call. Yeah, I've contacted you before. I was just wanting to share a little bit about my story, if that's okay.
Okay, we are running a little long. Maybe we can bring you on next time, but go ahead and share a little bit. I'll give you like 5 minutes if that's enough. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Do you need longer than
Originally,
that?
I got custody of my grandchildren in 2010 when they were 6 months old. And then in 2013, at the age of 4, they disclosed sexual abuse. And at the age of 4, during the CFE, Child Family Evaluation, the one that was more verbal, she pointed to where she was being touched. She told verbally where she was being touched. They drew an outline of a gingerbread man and asked her to touch mark where she's being touched, and she drew a circle between the legs. Since then, they had diagnosis of UTIs, vaginitis, erythema around their hymen. And you can't get erythema around the hymen unless something is inserted inside of the vagina. There has been diagnosis of sexual abuse by 2 hospitals. Law enforcement has lost a sexual assault kit. DSS has taken the children twice within 2 years and put them in foster care due to violation of custody orders. I have 2013 and 2017 where DSS states that my home is safe and no abuse, but they've taken the children twice within 2 years from my home, even though my home is safe and there's no abuse. They gave the mother a book to read last year on how to help your child recover from sexual abuse. The children disclosed to the social worker last year. One of them told the social worker he touches it all the time. He rubs it. He swipes it like he has a wipe. I have went to my senator and spoken with him because there's not been a proper investigation, including with law enforcement. I have him on recording stating that something has happened to these children. So now supposedly my local law enforcement is supposedly doing an investigation, but I don't believe that they are. I've not seen my grandchildren in over a year, who has been living in my home since 2010, because I believe my grandchildren were sexually abused, and that's why they will not let me see my grandchildren. But there's hospital diagnosis.
What you're saying is you believe because they're not doing anything about this sexual abuse, that there's a liability on the system because they were in their custody. They don't want grandma, who cares about these children, is going to pursue some potential action about this. They don't want you getting any more evidence that you could utilize against them. Is that what you think's going on?
Oh, absolutely. So they removed me from the DSS case, and then they had a trial, right? After they removed my husband and I from the DSS case, May the 9th of this year. And then they turn around, and during their trial, they state my husband and I are unfit. Well, we weren't in court to defend ourselves. So they have now placed my grandchildren in the home with the mother and her husband, who the children have been disclosing for 5 years as touching their privates. So now he has 24/7 access.
You know, I'd love to get more of your story, and I'm going to encourage you to do the same thing that I talked to Marilyn about. If you want to write something out a little more detailed and how maybe we can help you out, send that, message that, talk in the group. We'd like to get more of these stories out. A lot of people don't realize that often, which hopefully this new legislation changes. And our hearts go out to you. I'm not a grandparent yet, but just knowing what my children were going through when they were suffering, it's such a feeling of outrage and powerlessness. And you're going to definitely in our prayers and hope that somebody steps in to help these children. But yeah, if you want to send more information, we possibly have you on another show and get in a little more detail. I don't want to get too graphic. I don't want to, use this as a platform to people going after other people necessarily, but we need to get these stories out. We need to come together and advocate not only for parents, but for grandparents, because a lot of times they'll even, like they did with you, give the grandparents the children, and then I've seen them put them back with abusers often. Doesn't make any sense, except if you understand that these people in this system, there are many of them that are very destructive in in their views politically about family. But not only that, they get more money for damaged children. If you have a special needs child, if you have a child that's medicated, that's why like 1 out of 4 foster kids are on some kind of psychotropic drug, because when these children are actually damaged, they even maximize the federal incentives more. It's a real tragedy. If you'd like to hear more of your story, please send us an outline, and know that our hearts and our prayers are with you. And we definitely want to also take some kind of action to see if we can connect you with people that can help you out in this situation. But unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left. We're near the
I
end
wanted
of the
to say
show here,
2 more things, if I can, Raymond.
Sure, please do.
When both hospitals diagnosed my one granddaughter with sexual abuse, DSS did not accept their reports to investigate. I have the documents. In 2014, a detective filed a report with DSS. They did not accept that detective's report to investigate. I have the documents. Anything I speak of, believe me, I have the documents. I have the documents in 2015 where they wanted the mother to acknowledge the possibility that sexual abuse has occurred. And they wanted her to explore ways to keep her children protected from emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. That's in 2015. They wanted the mother to acknowledge that, but now they think it was okay to put the mother with the mother. Put the children with the mother.
So in
January the 24th,
in your opinion, why do you think they're refusing to acknowledge these reports of sexual abuse from professionals? What do you think the motivation is for that? Why do you think that's occurring?
First of all, because in 2013 they didn't do a proper investigation. Not only that, but a social worker told law enforcement that there was no disclosure during the CFE. He lied. I have the documents. I have his own notes in his handwriting where he said that he told the detective that there was no disclosure. Come to find out that the perpetrator or the abuser, he has an aunt that either works with DSS or works in the office of DSS's attorney. We gained knowledge of this December 19th of last year. You see? January the 24th in North Carolina, they're having some kind of a meeting in reference to sexual abuse. It's supposed to be like law enforcement's going to be there. Psychologists are going to be there. I'm assuming some North Carolina representatives, because what they're wanting to do is hear from victims of what the state of North Carolina can do. What changes need to be made. And I am going to go. I already have my ticket. And I will be there, and I'm praying I get to speak that day.
And you're saying that's in North Carolina?
Yes, January the 24th.
Yeah, and I do believe we have some people down there that I know. Sarah Carter, if you're watching this show, and ma'am, if you post some information in the group, I know there are some activists down in the North Carolina area. Maybe they can also come alongside you, go with you, assist you. But sounds like a really, really horrible situation that we hope gets resolved speedily. But I can say from my experience, I've seen a lot of that. When you're seeing this abuse occurring, you'll find there's some kind of connection with the system where somebody's covering up for somebody else's behavior, or this person's related to a social worker, or this person is related to a judge that was involved in the case. There's all this conflict of interest in covering up of these abusive children. And it just demonstrates that the system is not in many places working to the protection of children, but the protection of their own system, which is what we got to change.
Well, see,
we definitely got to change
they took the children in 2015 and put them in foster care for violating a judge's order in the custody trial. And she court-ordered that these children cannot have therapy after they were diagnosed with PTSD, that these children cannot have pelvic exams due to sexual abuse, and that if these children disclosed sexual abuse, we had to redirect them and talk about door, ice cream, or the park. Now, it cost me about $1,500 to get the court transcript, transcribed. So I have all of that court transcript. That's why they took the children in 2015, because the children were still disclosing. They were saying their privates hurt, so they would go to the hospital, and they had a pelvic exam. Okay, by law, a child disclosed to sexual abuse within 24 hours, they're supposed to have a medical exam. Any female that's sexually abused or raped, she's supposed to have one within 72 hours. So they're going to take these little girls because of violation of a custody order. Can't no judge tell a parent or family that children cannot have pelvic exams due to sexual abuse, that children can't have therapy, and to redirect children if they disclose sexual abuse? You can't do that.
You know, and I would agree, but the thing we're finding more and more in these court cases is they do these things that the average person would see it and say, they can't do that. If they did that, you would have a tremendous lawsuit. I don't believe you that this is happening. And I appreciate you having the courage to share this live on our show, because it is happening. Mm-hmm. They are doing things that are completely unconscionable, that are unconstitutional, that are
right,
victimizing children and families. And I really hate to cut you off at this point, but we got to move on.
That's fine.
We're at the end of this show, but what I'd like to do is send me a message with how we can help. If I know you're anonymous right now, we can do it in a sensitive manner. If you want us to help connect you with some other activists down in North Carolina, maybe if you get a chance and you're going to speak at this event, if we could try to find someone to record it or get that what you speak on down there out in the public realm. Because I tell you what, the one thing I said in the beginning of this that I believe is an effective method to combat this stuff is when you got a grandma by herself down in North Carolina or wherever you're at that's battling these things and nobody's listening, they don't listen. But if that grandma was surrounded by 10 people, 15 people, live updates, broadcasts with the sensitivity, I mean, we don't want to put the children's information out there where people can identify them and they're ashamed, but where we can get this family's information out and let these courts and let these individuals know that this abuse is not going to be covered up anymore. We're not going to be gag ordered and have it's the exposure. I mean, that is step one, is coming out publicly and beginning to constantly proclaim in a public fashion through protests, through blogging, through going to court and court watching, through whatever mechanisms we can think of creatively to get this information out and get it out to start showing what's actually going on in these secret courts. I wouldn't doubt it. Have you been gag ordered through this process?
We were twice.
Yeah. And
2015 in this last case. I've been told that there's still a gag order now, but I've asked where I contacted the state DHHS. I have her on recording where she's more concerned about the gag order than she is the hospital records. And I said, well, ma'am, I'm not aware of a gag order. How about sending me a copy of it? And I would never tell her my name. She said, I know who I'm talking to. I said, well, fine. You know who I am, so send me a copy of this gag order. Well, you can go to jail. I said, that's fine. I'll go with my head held high. I said, because the gag order is only in place to keep me silent from getting the truth out of the sexual abuse that y'all are hiding. There's hospital diagnosis. The children have disclosed to like 4 different therapists, doctors and nurses, DSS. I mean, how many people do little children have to disclose that their privates are being touched? And I have all the records, all the documents. I even have, Ray, where a social worker edited a doctor's report and the DSS attorney made corrections to the report. I have those notes too. That's illegal. You can't be editing doctor's reports.
Yep, and I've seen that in a lot of cases as well. Well, ma'am, thank you for calling in this evening.
Thank you for your time.
Just let the other callers know that we'll have to take their call the next time. Please continue to call in, everybody. I think the next time around, I'll try to take calls a little earlier. So we want people to get their stories out. We want people to share these things that are going on so people can see this is really happening. This isn't just somebody's opinion. This isn't just some news stories we're sharing. These are real people, real children, real lives. We got to put an end to it. And we thank you all for joining us for this episode of We Hold These Truths. We are not going to be back on this coming Wednesday. We won't be on to the following Wednesday. Our producer has some family stuff to take care of day after Christmas. So we will see you. What date is that, Ted? Oh, no, I'm going to have to look it. I should have been prepared for this. We will be back on. Come on. My calendar won't install. When's the next Wednesday? What's the date, Ted?
It will be Wednesday the 2nd.
Okay. So
Yep.
Join us Wednesday the 2nd. Come in with your calls. We're going to start targeting these shows with individual things that people can do. We're going to try to get some guests on that can educate parents like Marilyn was talking about. We want to share more stories like Anonymous came on, and I could hear the emotion in her voice. I can hear the pain and suffering, and I hope she goes on the group in a manner where she feels safe and can get in contact with some activists from North Carolina. Matter of fact, this is what I'd like someone to do. If you're in the North Carolina area, or if you're in somewhere where you are interested in learning more and trying to help this grandmother out, go ahead and post in the group, and we hold this truth group. Say, I am an advocate. I am somebody in North Carolina. I'd like to learn more about your story. Contact me privately, where you can have some conversations to see how you can come alongside her. And for this group, we just want to warn everybody, not everybody out there that gets involved with this is going to have good intentions. No matter what we do, we're going to ask you, when you connect with people, when people say they got things that can work, that'll bring results to get your family home or to help your case, just really verify that information. Do your own research. Know your own rights. Send us messages. We'll try to connect you with people that can help you in your area. But continue to share these shows. We're going to develop it and get better as we go, and hopefully continue to chip away at this Title IV monster, this state-sponsored child trafficking machine, because we hold these truths that we are all endowed with our Creator, with the right and the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are given rights by our Creator that cannot be abridged by men, cannot be taken by governments. And one of those rights is to care for our children without government interference. And we want to help you fight those that want to come in and violate your constitutional rights, steal your children, put them in a dangerous foster care system. So join us again next Wednesday, the 2nd, not the one after Christmas. We thank you for joining us this evening. Have a good night.